All right, joining me now, our political editor, Andrew Clennell. Andrew, welcome. Tuesday, potentially a leadership spill. I think it's too early to call it right now. A lot of concern from people I've spoken to that Andrew Hastie and Angus Taylor could split the vote on the right. What's your take on things as they stand tonight?
Well, I've had a tip. I reported on Politics Now, Peter, that Angus Taylor and Andrew Hastie are about to meet tomorrow. And I think they might both be in Melbourne for the Katie Allen's memorial service. So perhaps there they'll have to thrash out which one of them's running. I don't think Hastie's going to stand aside for Taylor, and I think he's got more numbers than Taylor. But if both of them run, you're right, it could split the vote and Susan Lee gets up. So I think that's where we're at.
Any chance she survives, that there isn't a spill? Do you think they'll go back next week and there is no spill?
Sure. I mean, who knows? I'm not, I have a crystal ball on Sunday Agenda, but I don't have a crystal ball in this particular instance. I might have more to say on that Sunday, Peter, but yeah, I can imagine that. My experience tells me these things happen. But to me, it does seem kind of like when, not if, for Susan Lee's leadership. That's kind of where I feel things are at the moment, because there is a groundswell. She only won by 3 votes. One or so of them she wouldn't get now because they were an expired senator.
Two
yeah,
gone.
So
one was Giselle Kapterian, if you remember, and 2 were senators.
Yeah, that's true. And it's more about the right coalescing around someone. Now, Angus has got baggage because he opposed tax cuts. He can't walk away from that. He could say, "Oh, I argued against it." Well, too bad. You were the shadow treasurer, and he didn't have a great performance during the campaign. Whereas Andrew Hastie could argue, Andrew Hastie's a risk, obviously. Could he be the Liberal Latham, get a short-term bump and then explode? But he would argue I can take some of that One Nation vote pretty convincingly, I reckon. And look, I've felt for a long time, particularly if you had a leadership change this early in the term, this is one of those terms you could see 3 Liberal leaders. So that's worth bearing in mind as well.
Yeah, look, I don't think Hastie's got anything like the temperament of Latham. I think that the soldier in him has incredible discipline. But I think the problem for them is if they can't cut some sort of deal, if one can't give way to the other, then you go back next week and both decide not to move on Susan, or no one else moves a spill. Susan survives, and then she has to go through the circus of picking herself a front bench. I mean, basically every Liberal would be a shadow minister for something. There'd be huge changes with staff. Of course, all those National Party front benches currently have jobs from the leader's office. They'd all have to be sacked or moved elsewhere. All the rights and entitlements would all be shuffled around as well. And of course, the Nats then have to find themselves a shadow treasurer and a health shadow and a defence shadow. I think it's just a circus, and I think that's best avoided. And of course, they're all out by the shouting if they do not get themselves back in on coalition. That's the other thing they need to learn, is they've got to find a way back together. But there's a lot of bad blood on both sides.
Yeah, well, question time. My understanding is if the Nats are on the crossbench, so an effective backbench, effectively on the backbench, except for their party leader, Littleproud, the crossbench would get half the questions and the Liberals half the questions. So imagine that world. That's my understanding of what the government believes will occur. So you say, so you have 10 question time questions, right? 5 Liberals only get 5. Now they get 7. The coalition gets 7. So that's what you end up with. It'd be a total
Prime
schmozzle.
Minister that basically is the winner here, because there's even less scrutiny on a government that a lot of Australians would say is not living up to expectations despite that huge mandate and majority. Let's go to that story you broke this afternoon. Extraordinary stuff. Health officials changed the name of a Jewish Bondi shooting victim at a Western Sydney hospital away from a Jewish name into a more Anglo name. What the heck's going on here? Well,
a bureaucrat's mistake, and a damaging one, and concerns about safety of Jewish people in Western Sydney hospitals. Rosalia Schickberg, no consultation, was told by a health administrator, your name's got to change on your wristband while she's in hospital with gunshot wounds, shrapnel wounds to the head from the Bondi massacre. Obviously, they spread around hospitals across Sydney. There were so many victims. She became Karen Jones. Even her medication was allocated to Karen Jones. A discharge summary as well. I mean, once she leaves the hospital, even if they're trying to protect her, can't they use her name there, real name then? Now, they told her and her family that it was because of media, but what media are going to ring around hospitals looking for a Jewish name? That's just not going to happen. So let's.
Is this because they don't trust their staff after what happened allegedly?
That's right. So the health minister.
Is this because of the staff?
Well, that's what the Rosalia and her husband fear and believe. That was Bankstown Hospital next door, right? But Ryan Park, the health minister, was on. He said, no, it's not the staff. It's not the staff. But he admitted the media line to them was a lie. So it's either got to be the staff or patients or people known to the staff or patients.
What is it?
Well, this is it. It can either be the staff or the patients or people known to the staff and patients. It ain't going to be anyone else because no one else is going to, have access to a computer base or a wristband that says that a Jewish name. So it's got to be people who are patients, staff, or people connected to the staff. I think probably it's a bit hard to deny that one possibility that the local hospital management were looking at is staff could be a problem.
Oh, that's horrific. I mean, that's everyone's worst nightmare. I mean, that was the very issue that Jews were worried about when that video surfaced in the aftermath of October 7.
I think it's a significant story because it now raises questions about, unfortunately, I wish this wasn't the case, it raises questions about the safety of Jewish people in Western Sydney hospitals. All the other hospitals, there was no name change, for example. So they can't say, it's just related to the terror event. And Ryan Park himself, the health minister, said it was a local hospital decision. So is it just a bureaucrat stuffing up or are there real concerns? And frankly, if there was that level of concern, they should have had her under police guard, Peter.
I think it's horrific if this is where it's headed and it has very much the smell of that. We'll see what develops with that yarn tomorrow, Andrew. I spoke to Ross Greenwood last night. Talk of a rate hike next Tuesday. We've obviously got some data coming out ahead of that, which will be instrumental in terms of inflation. But of course, if there's a spike in inflation or it continues to remain high, the RBA doesn't have any other lever but to move rates. How's it going to play out for the government, given we've got also that news yesterday that there's a likely increase of some 24% in power bills this year alone?
Well, I just think they'll do more cost of living relief in the budget, don't you? I mean, they seem to get away with it.
That's inflationary, mate. That's the problem.
Yeah, I know, but
you spend, it's inflationary.
They seem to get away with it, Peter. You might have noticed the election result. I mean, that's the thing. So what I'm trying to say is when you got one extra rate hike and you got 4% unemployment and you keep throwing money at people, you'll probably get away with it, particularly with the opposition just not being able to get their act together. Where we're at in a year's time, different story perhaps. But I mean, you and I both know, even anecdotally, everything is going up. Everything. Insurance, health bills, anything you spend money. A cup of coffee, the other day it was $4, now it's $6. So I just think...
I know, but if the government pumps the economy with cash, Andrew, they just make that inflation burden longer and harder. It doesn't go away. They make it worse. And they're prolonging the pain for people.
Well, they need to get their budget in line, and that's where Friday's National Cabinet on the NDIS and health funding will be very interesting because they need to cut that NDIS spending as part of that spending. They would argue some of their other measures, or such as the electricity price rebate, actually dampens inflation, certainly dampens the headline number, but you can't do that forever, can you?
Just a quick one. I saw this in The Australian today. The Electoral Commission's got their usual ad when there's a change or a re-registration of a political party. Clive Palmer's old trumpet of patriots who really crashed and burned despite his millions, he wants to change that to the Australian Federation Party. That's The Australian today. I suspect he's looking at this increase in the One Nation vote and thinking, well, how can I get a bit of that? He's not Pauline Hanson, we know that. But what do you think's behind the move?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, relevance deprivation syndrome, but his preferences can still have a real effect. And that can give you some power, your preferences, let's face it. But look, Pauline Hanson getting Barnaby Joyce on board so far, and of course, you know, she and Mark Latham fell out. You know, these things, you know, sometimes there's too many egos for these small parties. They're looking in good shape. They're looking in good shape to win House of Rep seats. I even wonder why Barnaby doesn't just have a crack downstairs when you look at the polls the way they are, instead of talking about the Senate. Try and win New England, you know, because if they're serious, they need to get House of Representative seats, and you could see it happening at the moment. You really could. Not many, but some.
Yeah, he said it wasn't likely, and he ruled it out. But we both know politicians have ruled out plenty of stuff before and done a backflip and turned up where they said they wouldn't go. So we'll see what happens. Andrew, thank you. Well done on that story too, out of Western Sydney, the hospital there.